Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War Frontline update for the 1st of March 2024. I've just come off the back of doing a sort of, not breaking news, but just a little random video about Jared Kushner. I wanted to do a breaking news video, just a really quick one on the funeral of Alexei Navalny, because I think there's quite a bit to say about that. And quite a bit of footage coming out, and I didn't want to bog down tomorrow's news video with that. So I might do that a little bit later, I don't know. Depends on how much time I have. Nonetheless, let's get on with the Frontline video. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key to the map on the video at the moment. Pause the screen. Or on the screen at the moment, pause the video. Thanks so much to JR, who's done the mapping for me again today. I'm just in the middle of trying to send him one of my hoodies I've done for the Ukraine aid for when I went out to Ukraine. So as a kind of thanks, bit of a legend, he is. So give him his due thanks when you speak with JR on the threads. Let's go to where we normally start, which is the northeastern sector from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kremina. And as you can see, again, no changes there along that front line. That's been a couple of days of stasis. Good news for the Ukrainians, definitely. Well, if we look at what the Institute for the Study of War American Military Think Tank says, there's talk about a number of places where positional engagements are taking place. That is, that even though there are no changes, it will be tough around Sinkivka, it'll be tough around Tabaivka, and then as we come further down south to this salient here, which is the Novoherivka, Nadia area, and then around this slightly newer move towards Makivka that took place, although that's been quiet for the last few weeks, and then is quite hot around the Liman direction towards Torska and Terny up there. So although there are no movements, positional fighting is tough, challenging for the Ukrainians. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian brigade operating in the Kupiansk and Liman direction stated that Russian forces have been conducting 10 to 15 glide bomb strikes per day for the last several months. And I've heard from my own contacts that there are glide bombs being used along the front lines in the north, that's causing border troops that are positioned along there to change their behaviours. These glide bombs are being used to a huge degree all along the front line. And I showed you footage this morning or this afternoon of 6 jets flying somewhere over, I think, Donetsk towards Avdiivka, where you're thinking, my goodness, if each of those have got 4 to 6 glide bombs on them, then that's as many as 30 bombs hitting the Avdiivka area in one sortie, and that is incredibly worrying. Indeed, I think that's one of the main components of the Russian success. Yes, we can talk about the Ukrainians having a lack of artillery, and that is stopping the Ukrainians repelling the Russian equipment and troops from moving forward. But what stops the Ukrainians holding their ground is the pummeling they're getting from the air. And it's absolutely relentless. And those bombs are massive bombs. And so, if there are 10 to 15 every day for several months taking place along this whole front line, then you are going to grind down the Ukrainian resistance there. You're going to grind down their ability to fight back. You're going to grind down the civilian and infrastructural capabilities of the Ukrainians in the area. It is challenging, and that's why it's so important that the Ukrainians get, it may be risky behavior, but they need to get those air defense systems close to the front line. We've seen, perhaps, we haven't seen, but we're speculating that Patriots have been brought to front line, possibly Nazams as well, to hit these airframes as they're dropping the bombs. I'd like to see one brought quickly up to the north as well, to this northeastern area, and put paid to a few of the jets that are operating around there. But certainly they're going to be needed around the Avdiivka area, which a place we're going to go to soon. We're going to go first, though, to the Seversk front line from Bilohorivka down to Yakovlivka here. And we're going to look at the Berestova area, where some Ukrainian gains have been seen. Now, I don't know that there's a corresponding piece from Suryak Maps or tweet from Suryak Maps, but we might see one there. Nevertheless, I think it's more likely that the mapping was overzealous initially. It's again what we see so often with Suriyat maps, which is Russians have been seen in this position. Like a Russian has set foot there, or a Russian tank has been, or infantry fighting vehicles driven on this bit of earth, therefore the Russians control it. And of course, it's a grey zone. You've got both sides attacking and doing this and getting repelled, and neither side controls that area because that's your battle space where fighting's taking place. There's no robust control, but Suriyat Maps has a tendency to say, right, okay, so we've seen a Russian there or a Russian piece of equipment there, therefore they control it. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, the Ukrainians are there and they're being hit by the Russians. So obviously the Russians can't control it and I have to change my map. So he's just very quick to change in favor of the Russians and then often has to dial it back. So I don't think the Ukrainians have counterattacked there, but I might be wrong. I just don't have any information at the moment. Andrew Perpetua will be doing his Friday night live stream, I'm sure, tonight. It'll be worth checking into that. Always worth checking into that. Please go and support him in all the ways you can. And then some minor gains, as according to Andrew Perpetua, in the Saku-Vansetti village area. Just the other side of the meandering little river there, the Russians pushing a little bit towards Avdiivka, maybe holding a bit more ground than had been previously thought, but it's relatively minor there. And then we come down to the area to the west of Bakhmut, and we can see some real trouble for the Ukrainians in Ivanivska, if Suriyat Maps is to be believed. And I don't have yet, I think we're in that bit between where Suriyat Maps has done the mapping update and is yet to send out the tweets to correspond with each of these. So I don't have much from them from a granular perspective, but we can see what's going on there in terms of map movements. Now, Institute for the Study Wars says that there are reported advances to the west of Bakhmut, so in these kind of areas, but nothing particularly worth repeating to you there. Just as you can see, Deep State Map and Andrew Perpetua much more conservative in terms of what the Russians control in Ivanivska or at the edge of Ivanivska. Suriyat Maps going right into the middle there. That could be the case. I'm not denying that is true. I'd just, be a little bit skeptical. This is a worry. The Ukrainians need to keep hold of Ivanivska as a buffer zone towards for Chasiv Yar. I think Chasiv Yar is looking like it's going to be under some intense pressure going forward. The question I have about this Russian phase at the moment is, yes, it's all looking good, but I think that's partly fueled by their air advantage. It's not an air superiority. They are not doing close air support. It's not close. They're doing air support from back here and dropping guided glide bombs. Now, their ability to do that means that they can have that advantage on the ground as well. Now, if the Ukrainians can keep attriting the Russian Air Force as they are at the moment, possibly another plane shot down this morning, still not had verification of that, but 3 shot down yesterday. If they can keep doing that, then the Russians will surely eventually lose too many planes and pilots to be able to continue that pressure. But I wonder, without that, whether they've got the equipment in terms of infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. We saw a phenomenal loss of infantry fighting vehicles over the last 2 days. Whether they've still got the ability to do that. If they're attacking in all these different places that you're seeing, all along the front line, and still trying to get that crinky bridgehead taken back and repel the Ukrainians there, but they're losing equipment hand over fist there, and you've got Robotina, and you've got a little bit of activity in Velika Novosilka. You've got a lot going on in Novomykhailivka, Marinka, Krasnohorivka areas, where the Ukrainians are struggling, but they are exacting quite a toll on the Russians, and they are losing all that equipment. I can't think that. So there are lots of worries from people on the front line, articles coming out. Guardian had one today, and it's to be taken seriously. Like, these Ukrainian troops on the front line are really pessimistic, and they are feeling it. I spoke to Greg Terry. He's like, the Ukrainians sent like 100 vehicles in to help the troops around Avdiivka, and there ain't many of them left. So he's like, things are a mess here. Things are bad. And You can't discount that, and I'm not discounting that. That is exactly what's happening. It is terrible for the Ukrainians. They're under a lot of pressure. My question is, how long can the Russians keep that up, and how much are they losing? So it's all about everything's about the relative comparative losses. So the Ukrainians are getting a pummeling in certain places, but they are still fighting back. Like in Avdiivka, I mean, I can't show you this, but this video below here with the $10, lots of people are sharing at the moment. You can go and look on YouTube, on Twitter, it's there. Russians dying in masses, whether east, north, south, or west of Avdiivka. And this is only the third video of the kind I've seen just today. Like I said, Ukraine is Russia's latest Afghanistan, but on steroids. Ouch, says no reports. Reported on the outskirts of Avdiivka, littered with Russian losses. I can't show you this, but that video, with my own eyes, you can see it. So that's I think a tank there. Is it this vehicle here? And either side of the tank are more dead bodies than I've seen in a single kind of aerial shot since the beginning of the war, right? And I've seen some pretty bad videos. That is typical of the Russian losses. Now, that's not to say that Ukrainians aren't losing those as well. But my point is that, can I foresee the Russians taking Mykolaiv in order to then go all the way to take Odessa? You know, people are now talking about Kharkiv is going to be, you know, you had some Ukrainians saying, John Sweeney was saying he's spoken to his frontline colleagues, or not colleagues, people he knows on the front line. He just got back from the front line saying, I think we could lose Kharkiv, Kupiansk, and Kramatorsk, right? So Kramatorsk is here. And you're thinking, well, okay, you've got Chasiv Yar, then you've got Druzhkivka, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka. I mean, that's a hell of a lot for the Russians to take. And then to take Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine. And then the idea that they might, and then also Kupiansk over here, where they're getting stuck at Sinkivka. And then the idea is that they really want to get to Transnistria. They want to take Odessa, Mykolaiv. Like, I just don't think they can do that. So as bad as it might seem on a micro level in these places, understanding it in terms of what the Russians are losing and how that affects their ability to continue the momentum. And if we start getting artillery ammunition starting to filter through, I know the 800,000 shells won't last a long time, but half of the funding for that is already in place. And we've got construction of artillery ammunition still taking place from Rheinmetall, still taking place around Europe, that is filtering in. It might not be enough for what they need, but it's ramping up continuously. You've got 100 APCs coming from Bulgaria. You've got bits and pieces coming. You've got European nations waking up and smelling the coffee. I think as long as the Ukrainians can do something about boots on the ground, going forward, I think Ukraine are looking in a better position. And Russia, this is their moment. I don't know that they can, in any significant way, massively improve on what they're doing now. I think this is as good as it's going to get for them. And when I say that, I think this next month, we'll see how far they can push in this next month. But I don't know. As long as the Ukrainians can keep taking those airplanes down, then I don't know that the Russians will be able to significantly push past that. I might be wrong. Please let me know if you think I'm well out there. The Kiev Independence says military Ukraine partially retakes ground near Avdiivka, although I think that came at quite a loss, quite a cost to the Ukrainians, as you know, Greg was saying, with those military equipment losses. While Russia pushes towards Chasiv Yar, this is where we are in Ivanivska. So just to say what is going on here, we'll get to. Well, no, let's read it all. According to Tarnavsky, Russian forces are increasing artillery strikes and infantry assaults near Avdiivka while calling up reserves. Okay, question is, how long can they keep doing that? The Ukrainian general described the situation as dynamic, as Ukraine's forces retook lost ground in some areas and set up additional firing positions and observation points. Over the past day, Ukrainian troops repelled 25 Russian attacks at the Avdiivka sector. The commander said killing or wounded 319 soldiers and destroying 36 pieces of equipment. Moscow's troops have been focusing their efforts also near Chasiv Yar, a city west of occupied Bakhmut. So that's Ivanivska area that we're just looking at. The Kortitsia group of forces spokesperson Ilya Yevlash told Radio Free Europe that Russia accumulated a large force in the sector and is currently launching a powerful thrust towards Chasiv Yar, which is why we see this Ivanivska push from the Russians. So again, I think they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at Avdiivka and at Ivanivska, and places like Krasnohorivka and Novomikhailivka. I think that basically this is their point of just is all or nothing. I could be really wrong. Russia sees the city as crucial, so Chasiv Yar, for further advances toward Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, and Slovyansk, which is the idea that they take Ivanivska, they'll be able to take Chasiv Yar, but that's going to be tough for the Russians to do. That's really well defended. And then that will allow them to take, but this is a conurbation almost, and I think it would just be very difficult for them to continue that momentum if they are losing the equipment they seem to be losing on a daily basis, and personnel. Yes, they can draw from many more, but when you have people marching the streets today talking about no to war, Putin's a murderer, chanting that at Navalny's funeral. And when you've got body bags that will be coming back in increasing numbers to Russia, I don't know that they will have the continued appetite and ability to do that. But again, I could be very, very wrong. Preparation for Chasiv Yar's defense has been underway for a long time, even when the enemy captured Bakhmut, which I was reporting back during the Bakhmut fighting, that Chasiv Yar was being really well dug in. It's difficult topographically, and in terms of its physical geography of marshes and rivers and hills and forests, it's actually quite a difficult place, I think, for the Russians to take. Adding that the city is protected by minefields and anti-tank barriers. Russian forces are trying to find weak spots in the defences and focus efforts there to break through, according to the spokesperson. And I'm not trying to be positive. I think it's going to be very difficult for the Russians. But there you go. They are having success there, but again, not huge success in Klishchivka area. They appear not to be able to do all of these things simultaneously, although they're doing lots of things simultaneously in different places. Like, actually, the pushback in Robotine hasn't been overwhelming. There's talk about them pushing back in Velika Novoselka and wanting to take back all the lost area there, but that's not happening. They are pushing back in Novomikhailivka and Krasnohorivka, but they are taking one heck of a beating in terms of losing equipment. The Ukrainians are taking a beating too, but as I say, Avdiivka, the losses are tremendous for the Russians, and they're unable to take that trench network at Klishchivka. They're unable to push back in Avdiivka and Kurdimivka simultaneously. It might be that they can do that, but they have to take the troops from Ivanivska to do that, and then that means Ivanivska, will not be as dynamic. And so, yeah, it's recognizing the limits to what Russia is able to do, and it is bad in places for the Ukrainians. I mean, look at this in the Berditsy area and in the Orlivka area. As Suryat maps indicates that the Russians have taken all of this territory here. Now, there's talk about Orlivka, about the Russians being pushed back out of there yesterday. Well, Suryat map seems to be very buoyant, very bullish in the claims of how the Russians have done both there and Berditsy. We'll see. But then walking it back, maybe here we got this wasn't a place where I thought the Ukrainians had counterattacked, so this could be again a bit of a rejigging for Suryat maps, but then Deep State map rejigging or showing a Ukrainian counterattack, showing that the Russian defensive line is much further back behind Tonyanki actually than Suryat map. So there's a real difference in opinion here between the mappers, and up here in Orlivka and Berditsy, I'm just not 100% sure that Suryat maps has nailed that correctly. I mean, there's lots to say from the ISW, but nothing more to add really than what I've said. I will say this: Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Colonel Syrsky has acknowledged that Russian forces briefly gained a foothold on the outskirts of Orlivka before Ukrainian forces ousted Russian forces from that settlement. So that would have been yesterday. It could be that Suryat maps has got a correct counterattack from the Russians and they've retaken Orlivka. He has Orlivka fully under the Russian control. And anyway, to continue here, Ukrainian Tavris group of forces spokesperson denied reports that Russian forces captured Berditsy, and of course that is what Suryat maps is saying here, that Berditsy is under Russian control and has been captured. Ukrainians are denying that, but it might be true. And then, where was I? Here we are. Another Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces also advanced southwest of Avdiivka, near Novelska, and that's what was talked about yesterday. So there's no change there today, but that could indicate that Syriac Maps was correct in the what they call the plantations around here, the fields just south of Novelska or southeast of there. So as a bit of a mixed bag with possibly Ukraine pushing back a little bit. It's going to depend an awful lot on Ukrainian ammunition, access to ammunition. There are claims that Syrskyi has got ammunition as much as he can get to this area, particularly claims of vehicles being thrown at the problem as well, and it could be that the Russians are going to find it harder to push further to the west, especially when you've got this river and a bluff behind it that the Russians will have to negotiate. They'll have to come in from the north here, which is why I think this area is the key to continue Russian success, so they can pour in down here. It's going to be difficult for them to get equipment across that river. Okay, coming further to the south, and if we go to the Institute for the Study of War here, there is talk that Russians claiming that they made advances into Krasnohorivka, but a Ukrainian brigade operating in the area reported that they pushed the Russian forces back out. That's what I reported to you previously. And indeed, we're going to go past Marinka and Pobieda. No more information about there, and this is the Krasnohorivka though that we're talking about. So I think Institute for the Study of War there is just talking about yesterday's activities that I reported on yesterday. No changes there. We're going to go past Novomykhailivka and actually just show that Deep State Map has some gains for the Ukrainians, possibly pushing back towards Solodka, where we'd seen the Russians gain quite a bit recently. Both the map, or all the mappers had the Russians making gains. It's only Deep State that's showing some gains for the Ukrainians there, but that could be good news for them. And then we're going to move past Velika Novosilka sector and on to Robotyne, and as you can see, no change there, which is good news for the Ukrainians. Any day where there's no movement of the Russians is a day of stasis and is definitely good news. Let's talk about it being positional around there, according to the Institute for the Study of War, around Velika Novosilka, and positional around Robotyne. And I think the Ukrainians would definitely take positional fighting at the moment, given that the pressure they've been under. So then we're going to come down and look at Krinky, where Syriac Maps has the Ukrainians being pushed out of Krinky here, right? And this not out of Krinky, sorry. Pidstepny here. Sorry, got myself confused. And I was talking only yesterday about not having heard of Ukrainian control here for a long time, or at least that being a grey zone. So we had, at the same time that the Ukrainians got a foothold in Krinky, they got a foothold in Pidstepny and the Antonivsky Bridge, if you remember. But we haven't heard about the Antonivsky Bridge for a long time. We haven't heard about Pidstepny for a long time either. And mentioning it only yesterday, and now Syriac Map says that, well, Pidstepny is under Russian control. So as you can see from this tweet, this is from yesterday. Situation in Kherson front. There's been little change in the front line over the past 2 weeks. Russian armies managed to secure the former bridgehead west of Kozachi-Lahiri. Meanwhile, fighting continues in Krinky. Russian troops continue to have difficulties in clearing the bridgehead, as Ukrainian troops are still holding in the urban area and on the northern islands, from where sporadic incursions continue. Any attempts to land have failed during this time. Now, there was talk about a bridgehead in Kozachi-Lahiri yesterday. Be interested to see if there's any more news on that over the next few days or weeks. And according to Syriac Maps here, the Ukrainians appear to still be pushing, at least in Pidstepny, that hence the blue arrow there. But yeah, it could well be that they don't really control any, or at least it's not even grey zone, that the Russians are there. And that wouldn't surprise me. It seems pretty plausible that's the case, because there's just been no evidence provided by anyone really that the Ukrainians have been working hard there or have been there at all over the last, I guess really month, 6 weeks, 2 months. That's how long it's been since we've heard Pidstepny in, say, the Institute for the Study of War update. Now, for the ISW's update of the area, Russian and Ukrainian sources slated that positional engagements continue near Krinky and in the Dacha area near the Antonivsky roadway bridge. So interesting that that's now mentioned for the first time in a very long time on the ISW. And then that the Russian MOD acknowledged that Russian forces repelled a Ukrainian attempt to land at the Tendriska Spit, a thin sandbar south of the Kimburn Peninsula. Okay, so no more from this area, although I will say that this area fascinates me. It fascinates me that Ukrainians are still there. I do wonder what's going on further afield in places like the Antonivsky Bridge, in places like Pidstepny and Kazachi Lahiri. So we'll always keep a close eye on that one. But what the ISW is referring to is that failed special forces attack where maybe up to 20 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. Varying reports, somewhere between 4 and 20 killed. One report is 3 out of the 4 boats that were used were taken out. That there's possibly a POW was one of the survivors. Anyway, those varying accounts of what took place. Either way, it was a failed attack and it didn't go well for the Ukrainians. And that was past the Kimburn Spit and onto this bit there. I guess the Ukrainians is trying things out, but it's a pretty risky thing that I doubt would have massive. I don't know. Would it have decent tactical operational advantage controlling there? I guess you could try and inch your way forward and keep feeding forces onto there if you control it. But nonetheless, as I said previously, it's so difficult when drones are everywhere to do any surprise attack. I don't think there's any such thing as a surprise attack anymore in this information dense world that we live in, where everything's monitored. And this battlefield, this war, with the amount of drones on either side, means that you are going to struggle to do any surprise attack. If the Ukrainians are making 200,000 first-person view drones in 2 months, 100,000 a month, you work that out per day, and they're being sent to the front line. They're all looking at stuff, even if they're FPV drones. If you're going to catch a convoy moving, then that's going to be reported back. Those drones are being used just all the time, and that's just first-person view drones. Then you've got Bayraktar TB2s doing reconnaissance. You've got reconnaissance drones. You've got octocopters, all sorts of stuff. Eyes in the sky, looking all the time, and that's just the Ukrainians. The Russians are going to be doing that too. And then you've got satellite imagery. So it's very difficult to see huge surprise attacks taking place from either side, and that presents a problem. That feeds into a stalemate where things only change by direct attacks of grinding your way forward. I think the days of the counteroffensive, the Kharkiv counteroffensive, that lightning counteroffensive, I think are gone now. I think it'll be very difficult to do something like that again. I think both sides are prepared and both sides are tooled up with drones aplenty. Anyway, let me know what you think. Am I talking nonsense or somewhere near cogency? I need a cup of tea. I'm going to put it in my Russian warship. Go F yourself, mug. And get on with my Friday night. Take care, everybody. Speak soon.